Hi there, Alison here with another Cab Franc du jour. Today's wine is taking us to Saumur-Champigny, and we're looking at the Domaine des Roches Neuves 2019 Saumur-Champigny La Marginale. The sixth generation in a long lineage of vignerons from Bordeaux, Thierry Germain came to the Loire Valley in the early 1990s and purchased the existing estate Domaine des Roches Neuves in 1991, which at the time was owned by Denis Duveau, who decided to sell the domaine following the frost of 1991 that wiped out his entire crop. With a strong focus on biodynamic viticulture and a great attention to detail in the cellar, Thierry has since led Domaine des Roches Neuves to become one of the Loire Valley's leading estates, earning him the admiration and respect of vignerons from across France and beyond. Today, Thierry and his son Louis are farming around 28 hectares of vines, of which 26 hectares are Cabernet Franc. And from this, they are making an elite range of Cabernet Francs, including 5 cuvées parcellaires that seek to communicate their respective terroirs in the finished wines, and do so with remarkable clarity, energy, and balance. Today, we're looking at La Marginale, which is coming from parcels in the commune of Dampierre-sur-Loire, which is one of 6 communes in the Saumur-Champigny appellation that hugs the bank of the Loire River and then extends south towards the center of the appellation. Dampierre-sur-Loire is around 3 kilometers from north to south and about 2 kilometers wide from east to west. The topography of this commune is quite varied, and the nature of the topography has exposed a diverse patchwork of soil textures and origins, making this commune one of the most complex to define from a terroir perspective in the entire Saumur-Champigny appellation. But I am going to do my very best to highlight a few of the key themes here. Now, there's 2 areas in the commune that are dominated by the Turonian tuffo chalk influenced soils, most notably in the north and northeastern part of the commune towards the border of Saumur-Champigny to the east, and also in the southwestern portion of the commune, right around the hamlet of Chaintre towards the border of Varrains to the west. In these areas where we find the Turonian tuffo chalk, the vineyards are typically at elevations of around 45 to 60 meters above sea level. We will find any number of exposures here because of this undulating topography. And in terms of the underlying bedrock, what we find most common is the middle Turonian tuffo chalk. And this is a glauconitic micaceous chalk here, and it's known locally as craie verte. Now, in terms of topsoils, there's actually a certain degree of uniformity here where we find the Turonian tuffo chalk bedrock. We are dealing with, for the most part, more shallow topsoils, so we're hitting that tuffo chalk bedrock within 100 centimeters or less of the surface, and then the topsoil texture tends to be a silt, clay, sand mix. Now, in the central and southern parts of Dampierre-sur-Loire, this is actually where we find vineyards that are just a slightly higher elevation, around 60 to 85 meters above sea level. And this is where we find soils that date to the Cenoanian age and the Eocene epoch. And compared to the vineyards where we find the influence of the Turonian tuffo chalk, these areas where we find the Cenoanian age and the Eocene epoch soils are a lot more difficult to define. There aren't the same patterns as to what soils we find where, and there's actually a huge variety of soils and combinations of soils and topsoils. We find sands and clay sands that are often mixed with a combination of flint and or sandstone pebbles. There's also some areas where we find the lacustrine limestone. This dates to the Eocene epoch. It is a harder freshwater limestone as well. Now, that said, in the central and southern parts of the commune, the topsoils actually tend to be a little bit on the deeper side, but we will find any number of topsoil textures: sand, silty soils, clay, very, very clayey soils, and literally everything in between. Now, I mention all of this, which to some may seem like minutiae, but these factors are important. They influence viticulture. They influence the vine's access to water, the potential vigor, the potential yield, the precocity of a site, and all of this influences the rate of phenolic maturity and the degree of phenolic maturity that the grapes achieve by the time of harvest. And for some vignerons, like Domaine des Roches Neuves, these factors will influence how they work with that fruit in the cellar in terms of vinification and élevage. So looking at the parcels for La Marginale a little bit closer, this is coming from 2 hectares of vines just west of the hamlet of Chaintre, towards the border of Varrains, and we're in the lieu-dit of Les Fosses de Chaintre, which is part of a larger historical area known as Les Hectares, which actually also extends into Varrains to the west. Now we're at an elevation on average of around 45 meters above sea level, and the parcels are oriented ever so slightly to the northwest. In terms of soil, that's really what defines this cuvée, and that is what influences and has dictated the Domaine's decisions over time in terms of vinification and élevage. So what we're dealing with here is deeper soils, about 2 to 3 meters of soil, and about more clayey soils. So we have a topsoil that is more of a clay silt mix with a bit of sand, and then a very clay subsoil. So we've got up to about 3 meters of soil, and then we hit that middle Turonian tuffeau chalk bedrock after that, the craie verte. The vines are on average around 45 years of age. Now this cuvée, La Marginale, is actually one of the historical cuvées of Domaine des Roches Neuves that was created by Denis back in 1989. And this wine was intended to emulate Bordeaux. So Denis he focused a little bit more on higher ripeness levels, higher alcohols, higher maturities, a bit more aggressive approach to extractions in the cellar, longer macerations, longer élevage in 100% new oak. And this wine was really intended to challenge the perceptions of the wines of Saumur-Champigny, which at the time were considered not serious. And for the most part, they were fruity, early drinking styles of Cabernet Franc. And so this cuvée was named La Marginale by Denis' friend Charlie Foucault of Clos-Rougeard. Now, when Thierry took over the Domaine in 1992, and with the 1992 vintage specifically, he continued to make this cuvée, La Marginale, from the same parcels as Denis, and in a very similar manner as well. And over time, as Thierry became more confident as a vigneron, more confident as a winemaker, more confident with his vines, with his soils, he began to slowly evolve his approach with this wine in the cellar, most notably with the élevage. So he started to dial back on the new oak as of the 2002 vintage, and then by 2005 he has eliminated all the new oak for this particular cuvée. And then the size of barrel has changed as well, getting progressively smaller over time, or excuse me, larger over time. They began with 300 and 500 liter oak barrels, and today they're now working with larger oak foudre for the élevage. Now, in terms of the winemaking for this wine today, it begins with hand-harvested fruit that is twice sorted, once in the vineyard and once in the cellar, and the fruit is all destemmed but not crushed. And then the fermentation takes place in larger wooden vats with indigenous yeast, and the target fermentation temperature range is around 20 to 25 degrees Celsius. In terms of the approach to extractions with this cuvée, we are looking at infusion. So very delicate approach to extractions, and they will do a little bit of a wetting of the cap as needed periodically throughout the fermentation. Now, the total time on skins is around 18 to 20 days. And then for the finished cuvée, this is all free run wine. So no press wine is used in the finished cuvée. And the aging takes place in 25 hectoliter oak foudre for about 12 months before bottling, and that is intended to preserve the fruit profile and the sense of roundness that is given by the clays. So let's dive in. So the nose has a really nice clean profile, very fresh. It's perfumed, but I would not say super aromatic. There is a lovely fragrance to the wine, but it's not like leaping out of the glass. In fact, it's actually kind of deeper into the glass. And I've noted this before, as sometimes with Cabernet Franc, I find that aromatics kind of like just jump out, whereas other times, sometimes they go deep, deep, deep into the base of the glass. And that's really what these aromatics are doing. I'm getting a mix of red fruits predominantly. There's a little bit of darker fruit there. Sweet tart fruits, kind of a mix of raspberries. There's a touch of cherry, a bit of black raspberry as well, so red and black raspberry. The savory notes are really, really nice. There's herbal undertones and evergreen notes, sage, a little bit of tarragon, like kind of a licoricey note. There's a little bit of a spruce and cedar leaves component. Nice florals as well. Again, not aromatic, like very perfumey, but there is like an underlying like spicy flower note, like pink flowers, like rose and peony. But yeah, overall the nose is really nice. It's very pretty, very, very Thierry Germain. His wines are so distinctive aromatically and structurally and texturally that sometimes I think I'm now at the point where like I smell the wine and I kind of know like almost instantly that this is from Domaine de Roches Neuves. On the palate, those red fruits come through really nicely. Actually, the fruit on the palate needs a little bit more on the tart side. There's a little bit more cranberry, some lingonberry in there as well. Palate's also quite spicy, which I really, really like, and it's a nice combination. I think some of that is like the florals pushing through in a really spicy way, like spicy kind of peony kind of notes, but there's also a beautiful Cabernet Franc spice melange thing happening, which for me, it's a little bit more on that pink peppercorn space. There's maybe even a little bit of a green peppercorn thing too. There's also some sweet spices in the wine, like allspice, not so much clove, which tends to be a bit more pungent. It's more like allspice, a little bit of cardamom. Actually, there's a little bit of almost like a black tea note as well, which I think kind of in combination with the spices and all the other elements that are going on, it gives this very subtle, almost chai tea-like kind of vibe to this wine on the palate. The acidity is lively, it's persistent and very constant throughout the entire palate experience. Tannins are really, really lovely. And I think that's really what's defining this wine for me, is they have a really nice velvety texture to them, very finely woven. And there is a sense of like a tactile nature, like a very textural element to the tannins, like not so much of a chew, but there is this almost stickiness to the tannins in the best way possible. Yeah, it's as if the tannins are completely enveloping the mouth and they're holding in a really beautiful way. And there is a broadness to this wine. Like I would say it's medium bodied for sure, but there is a breadth to this wine and there is depth as well. And you know, sometimes when I describe wines as being round, this is certainly round for sure. But oftentimes when I'm thinking of wines being round, I'm thinking more cylindrical, whereas this is sitting differently on the palate. Yeah, it's round and broad, but it's almost in this 3D kind of way, like spherical, as if rather than just being this cylindrical roundness through the mouth, it's as if the round is kind of everywhere. Just how this wine is filling the mouth. It's really, really quite cool. Yeah, it's really lovely. It's really about the texture. For me, there's the floral notes come through in a really pronounced way, and then it's just this wonderful textural sensation, which I really love. And the tannins are so beautifully managed. Like this is one of those things that Thierry has really honed in on over the course of his time as a vigneron and as a winemaker, is nailing Cabernet Franc with these gorgeous tannins that are so elegant. And even in the most structured cuvées where you have a powerful terroir that is very clay dominated like we have here, he manages to get such restraint, such elegance in terms of the whole overall profile of this wine. And this is a wine that I've really come to come to enjoy in recent years. It's actually not the cuvée that first introduced me to the Domaine. It was in fact, I think, the Franc that introduced me to Domaine des Roches Neuves, but way back in the day. And then I think it might have been Les Mémoires was the other cuvée that I became very familiar with. So this is kind of a newer wine for me, and I was fortunate enough to have older vintages of this last year when I was in London. In fact, I was there for my diploma graduation, and I had, amazingly, a 2012, and I also had a 95 from Thierry of this specific cuvée, and I've become quite smitten with it. I'm not sure whether it's the clay textural thing that's happening here, but I'm really enjoying this wine. And I chose the 2019 vintage because 2019 was in fact quite a dry vintage, a warm vintage, but I thought with the clay component to this cuvée that would actually give this wine a little bit more vibrancy than perhaps a wine or a fruit that was coming from more sandy soils that might have been impacted by drought stress. And I think that this is showing in a really beautiful way right now. So it's just starting to come into a really special spot with, well, I guess we'll say 5 or so years of time in terms of aging. But this has a long way to go. This is certainly a cuvée that you can age for, I think it should hold in this current state for probably easily 15 years. Like this has so much life left in it, but it's definitely one for the cellar for sure. But it is a cuvée to keep on your radar, and look for some of these older vintages. I've read recently that the estate now has a larger warehouse, so they're starting to release and hold back wines for later release and things like this, which is really exciting when a estate can do that, because then you get to kind of see where that wine wants to go, the trajectory. So you can decide, as a consumer, as a professional, well, how long do I want to keep this wine in my cellar based on tasting older vintages, which is always really cool. But if you are not familiar with Domaine des Roches Neuves, please get out from under the rock that you've been living under, because this is an estate that you need to have on your radar. And I have done quite a few videos now featuring wines from Domaine des Roches Neuves, because it is an elite estate in Saumur-Champigny. So definitely one to seek out if you are a fan of the wines from Saumur-Champigny and you love single vineyard wines in particular, and tasting different expressions of Cabernet Franc across different sites. This is definitely one to keep on your radar. If you have had the La Marginale or any other cuvée from Domaine des Roches Neuves, do let me know what that wine is in the comments below. And of course, as always, I will be back again soon with another wine. Cheers.